my title is Western Balkans moving towards EU membership and away from liberal democracy. If we go back to 1989 or 1990, we know that all of the countries in Eastern Europe, they had to go through several transformations, right? They had to go through the economic transformation. So from a one-state economy, they had to transform the state economy to the market economy. From state firms, they had to create somehow private firms. So they had to figure out how. So there were the processes of the privatizations and restitution. Sorry? All right, okay. Not hopefully you can hear me because I've heard some, yeah. So then there were other transformations they had to go through, which was the political and social transformation there as well. In the non-democratic regime, we had one big communist party and then maybe some satellite parties, but then suddenly we had to create or open the space for more political parties, right? And what shall we do with the Communist Party? What shall we do with these people? Shall they be allowed to enter the political arena, right? And we also had to create like independent checks and balances, right? Independent judiciary. What shall we do with the old judges, right? What shall we do with them? And last but not least, in the political space, it was about the fall of the state. I mean, Czechoslovakia, it was like a nice scenario. Nevertheless, I talk about Southeastern Europe. And now we have suddenly from one state, from Yugoslavia, we have loads of many states. And now you have to think about, well, you have a new state. How will you call the state? What's going to be the name of the state? What's going to be the currency of the state? What about the flag? Who's going to draw the flag? Who is going to draw the emblem, right? So these kind of things. Plus, obviously, then what are we going to do with the ethnic minorities? Is there going to be a war or not? And you know that quite a lot of countries, they went through the war. And then there's the social transformation about the transition justice, right? So what shall we do with the past? Shall we just forget it? Shall we talk about it? Shall we open the files? How shall we do with the social transformation? And obviously, we thought in 1990, it's just like one way. And in 5 years, we're going to reach a liberal democracy. Nevertheless, this hasn't happened. And quite all of these countries, they didn't end up having liberal democracies, no matter they strived quite a lot and quite many times. And they ended up somewhere else. They ended up with some democracies with adjectives, or what we call illiberal democracies or hybrid regimes. So now if you look at the democracy index 2018, where are we now in Southeastern Europe? Most of these countries, they wouldn't be called full democracy at all. They're somewhere in the rank between flawed democracy or a hybrid regime, so something we don't really want to have. And no matter EU said like 2 years ago that the EU would like to have a Serbia and a Montenegro in 2025 in the EU ranks, which is obviously not going to happen since we don't have full liberal democratic regime in these countries. Right? So if we go one by one in these countries, where are we now? Well, you know, there was this war in Croatia, and after then, the regime was not really liberal. After 2000, the country started to democratize and join the EU. And everyone thought, well, joining the EU, then we're going to have a shiny, happy future, right? So everything is going to be fine. We're going to be all right. But still, there's so many things which are not sorted out in Croatia yet, right? There's the national reconciliation from the war is missing, right? There are so many issues. The country and both nations, they haven't talked through, right? And still sometimes there are attempts to hold over media and judiciary, right? So there is still a way to go towards a full liberal democracy in Croatia. Serbia, well, Serbia is not a nice picture at all. Well, Serbia, I would not call Serbia a democracy with adjective. I would rather call democracy authoritarian regime. Since, I mean, Serbia went through the wars in Croatia, Bosnia, Herzegovina, and Kosovo. And what they do have now, it's something which is not very nice. There is this state capture, party state capture. And the party and the guy, Alexander Vucic, he holds over the media, he holds over the resources. There's nothing like independent judiciary. So if you want to, put someone to the court, make sure it's not from the leading party, it's not from the incumbent. There's nothing like independent institutions. And even though the elections take place each and every 4 years, and there are flaws in the elections. Like it happens that people vote 2 times, 3 times, dead people vote. The people who emigrated, they suddenly come back to the country and they realize they voted and they've been abroad, right? So Serbia is not a nice picture at all from all these countries. If you look at Montenegro, well, maybe you've heard the name Milo Djukanovic. Well, Milo Djukanovic has been with us for last 30 years, maybe how many it is, either be it in the role of the prime minister or president or whoever, and he's been there. And what he created out of the country, again, it's not a nice picture, holds over the media, holds over the resources and over the judiciary, right? And there's this motto, whoever is not with us is against us. Very much similar case as in Serbia. And I am highly skeptical that Serbia and Montenegro will join the EU in 2025. Bosnia and Herzegovina, well, beautiful country, but there was a war as well till 1995. Still, even though the war ended in 1995, not a nice picture. What we do have here is what I would call a failed state. Even though the Dayton Peace Agreement created a constitutional system, the state is not working at all, and there are still parties based on ethnicity, and the one part of the state doesn't want to be in this state. So there is this like strife for like division of the state, and the regime again is nothing what we could call a liberal democracy. Rather, in one part, I would call it a competitive authoritarian regime of Milorad Dodik. And even though there are demonstrations on a daily basis against the regime, still the regime is getting very tough and tougher and tougher. There's nothing like independent journalists. There's censorship of the media, there's self-censorship of the journalists. Well, North Macedonia was very much similar picture till 2016 when we had the government of Omero Ordogan, which used the policies of anti-acquisition and nationalism. Since then, there was a change of the regime and a change of the party at least. Still, since the state capture was so deep, I wouldn't say it was dismantled yet. The institutions are so much deeply mantled in the state capture. So it's like taking time, and again, North Macedonia couldn't be called a liberal democracy at all. Plus, there is a great polarization of the society in North Macedonia. Kosovo, well, Kosovo, again, nothing nice to be said about Kosovo, since until recently the government was run by the people who were very close to the organized crime activities and the former UÇK, so the former Kosovo Liberation Army fighters. And in the last elections, this guy, Albin Kurti, won the elections with the political party Vetevendosje movement, which means self-determination movement. And this guy, his new policy, or new, not, it's not his new policy, but his policy is that he would love to create a greater Albania, in the meaning to, redraw the borders and include Kosovo, Albania, and Macedonia, and put them together and create a greater Albania. Albania, it's not that bad as in Serbia. The picture still nothing like independent judiciary, nothing like independent media, and the political scientists do talk about the captured state as well. The demonstrations, yes, in all of these countries, there are demonstrations on a daily basis, even during COVID. So there are like several different ways how to express the people's point of view. So what do we miss here? Even though in all of these countries there are free and fair elections, or that there are elections which do take place, we can't really call them free and fair, since there's multiple voting. There's voting of dead people, of people who emigrated. The electoral commissions are highly politicized. There's vote buying. If you don't vote for us, you're going to be fired. If you vote for us, you're going to get the job. If you vote for us, we're going to give you money, right? And there's this blurring of state and party activities. So before the elections, there's nothing like, campaign, because the state campaign sponsor for the state, for the governing party, for the incumbents, right? And there's a high control of the media. Media freedom, as I said, there's a great censorship, self-censorship, so many direct verbal and physical attacks on journalists. And these are stirred and stimulated by the politicians. And the politicians make these pictures, they point at the journalists and tell the journalists are the baddies. Right? We don't like the journalists, right? They create this kind of like motion that the journalists are the baddies. And there are so many arrests of investigative journalists. So media freedom is not a nice picture in the Western Balkans. Judicial independence, again, there is a direct pressure on the judges. But if there is someone who is a member of the governmental party, he's not going to be put to the court because he did something, right? So there are indirect pressure on the judges in terms of their promotion or further career. If you sue this guy, you're not going to get promoted. Well, think about your further career. Think about your appointment, right? And obviously, there is a lack of prosecutors who want to investigate deeds by the incumbent. So nothing nice. Privileged access to public resources and misuse of power, very much similar case. If you're going to vote for us, if you're going to like us, we're going to give you economic subsidies. We're going to give you the contract, right? We're going to give you the tender. So there's also appointing only party loyals to the top positions in public companies, right? So the privileged access to public resources is only for the those who are the members of political parties. And civil societies, as I said, demonstrations on daily basis, still the regimes preserved there. Other independent institutions, well, if you work for the university, you can't just talk openly about the politicians. If you are a political scientist, you have to side with the ideology of the party, since the party equals the state in many of these countries. I'm not talking about all of them, but in most of these countries, the party equals the state. So the results, state institutions disproportionately deployed by the incumbents, judiciary in favor of those, media disproportionately in favor of the incumbents, public resources disproportionately used by the incumbents, universities and other independent institutions under pressure, and the result is a state capture. So my final point is that we all thought that we're going to reach liberal democracy and everything is going to be shiny, happy. No, it's not a static, but rather a living force. And it's something we have to fight for because it's the most deeply honorable form of government ever devised by a man. And we have to keep fighting on and on and on, since it's nothing which is going to sort itself out on itself. So thank you for your attention.